us all together tonight. And we also have a special guest here tonight that we're going to hear from, the president of the Smithtown Library Board, who's going to, we're going to have a little chat about what happened and how things got turned around and how we can move forward, in making sure that this doesn't happen again. So last week, as most folks know, that it was just about a week ago, I think, a week ago on Tuesday, from tomorrow, that the memo from the Smithtown Library went out, ordering all the libraries in the town of Smithtown to take down all pride displays and books in the children's section. And this included the 4 libraries across the town of Smithtown. There was great outrage here from most folks here, and also across many other platforms, and parents and teachers and students. The issue itself went national, and it went national because of the activism and the voices that were of everyone here that spoke up. And the voices were so loud, and the movement was so strong that within 24 hours, the board reversed its decision. And now the displays and the books are out at least until June 15th. We'll hear a little bit more about that. I think it's important to remember it wasn't the librarians that did this. It was 4 members of the board that did this, and that made this decision initially, and then a couple of them reversed their decision a day later, or 2 days later. And then the next day, the very next day, was the Supreme Court ruling that stripped away women's rights, reproductive freedom overall, for women to choose what to do with their bodies. And it was the first time our Supreme Court has ever taken away rights instead of extended additional rights. And, which was a very alarming decision for many different reasons. And then additionally, Justice Thomas offered a concurring opinion that said, basically, bring on marriage equality, bring on contraception, and bring on consensual sex between 2 adults, which is the Lawrence v. Texas ruling. And of course, Obergefell, which was the ruling that afforded marriage equality across the entire United States. So, this has been part of a longer term strategy of the right-wing extreme agenda. We have an extreme right-wing Supreme Court right now that wants to take a look at marriage equality, or is basically saying, hey, please bring it on, right? So it won't be too long probably before we see marriage equality reach the Supreme Court in some form. But what this really told us, a couple of things I think were very important last week. One, to have the reversal in the town of Smithtown showed what our collective voices can do when we work together, right? When we all come together and speak up. It wasn't only LGBT folks, it was parents, it was teachers, it was students, it was young people, older people, all different generations that spoke up and said that this is not right, this is not fair. And part of what's happening to our school boards and library boards across Long Island, and it's happening in Queens too, is that there's a group called the Long Island Loud Majority, which professes itself to be known as a MAGA group, right? A Trump MAGA group. And so their policies are not progressive, they're hateful. And they look to take away rights and incite violence in many different forms. What we showed last week was that we were the majority, right? We were the majority, and when we all work together. And so that, in the end, we're going to come around to that tonight, as we're going to introduce to you several different initiatives that the LGBT network is launching so that we could continue the momentum of what we did last week. But do so to create permanent institutional change. When we work together and we organize together across different justice issues, social issues, and we do that as effectively as we did last week, we really are the majority. And part of what I want to talk about later is not just settling for what is the status quo now, because the status quo as it exists in our schools is woeful in terms of education and instruction around LGBTQ issues, and we need to go a lot further than that. And so we have we have a plan to roll that out. I think what's happened a lot is that, for those of us on the progressive side, when I say progressive, meaning that we believe in fairness and equality and safety for all. I mean, that should be a basic right, really. Is that we've tended to shy away from the things that really needed to be done because we didn't want to hear those voices that go and say horrific things at our school board meetings and say horrific things elsewhere. And I think if anything from last week, from the Smithtown Library Board fiasco to the Supreme Court of the United States told us, is that we have to go full force. We're on the right side. We're on the right side when we're looking at bringing justice, equity, and equality and safety to all families. So with that just gives a little bit of a framework. And now, we have a lot of people on this call. So generally at a town hall, if we had it at our Hotbox Center or our Astoria Center, people would get up and speak. And so we do want to give a little time for that, but realize that, we have, a couple of hundred people here so far. And so, yes, we just want to hear a little bit from you about what's on your mind. What are some of your concerns, that you may be having now. So a few minutes to share, and then we're gonna then start to get into the meat of what we really are looking to do with these new initiatives. So with that, and JR, you're moderating it, or going to allow? Okay, we have a raised hand. Serena.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Hey, David, great to see you and great to see everyone here. This issue was particularly just egregious to me because I'm in Kings Park, town of Smithtown, and take my 11-year-old to the library all the time, and spoke to everyone in my neighborhood about this issue. And most folks just did not understand what was happening. So we mobilized, obviously, New Hour, the Long Island Social Justice Action Network, and just so grateful for the mobilization that this group has done to make this sort of momentous reversal happen. So grateful for all of us, because I think this issue gets at the very heart of so many of the issues we care about, including incarceration of our youth, over-incarceration of people of color, segregation in our schools. So I'm just so grateful for the wonderful work that you all did.
Thank you, Serena. Appreciate that. And for you as well. Thank you. All right. I have to put on my glasses. I think we have the Cooper family, but it's not Craig Cooper. It's Mackenzie. Okay.
No, it's me. Craig's right here. So my name is Mackenzie. I am 18. I just graduated from Smithtown High School West. And to say that I was absolutely appalled, but also just so proud of the activism in my community. Just the underlying hatred. There's no other word. I don't want to sugarcoat it because it's hatred in High School West. And I don't want to speak for East, but I'm guessing it's a similar environment towards just progressive minded people. It's just so discomforting for me, and I'll bet you for a lot of other people who aren't willing to speak up. And I know that, the actions that we all took here as a community to kind of speak up and finally gain traction on an issue that's been so prominent in our community is something that's heartwarming to me. And I know for a lot of other people whose voices are yet to be heard. And as much as I know that we're all going to sit here and talk about what we can do better, and also just talk about and identify the issues that have happened, in the midst of everything that's going on, not only in our community, but nationwide, it really gives me hope. And I'm so thankful to be a part of this. So
cool.
Thank
you, Mackenzie. And, and thank you for speaking up. And I know that, and we're going to talk a little bit about school boards as well. Last week was the library board, but Smithtown has certainly had its share of, let's just say, eventful school board meetings. So but we're going to change that. We're going to change that. And that's some of what we're going to talk about, because we can organize better than the other side, as was shown last week. And we did it so quickly, but again, we'll get to that toward later on. Elliot?
Hi, everyone. Like everyone has been saying, I was incredibly moved by the response to the Smithtown decision, like the way everyone kind of really immediately moved in on that was really inspiring to me. It's something that hits close to home. I work for the Northport Public Library. I've been working there for years. I'm the only openly trans person on the staff. And just to see such a negative decision in the library, which has been a very safe place for me for a long time, it was rough. It was definitely disheartening. And just knowing that I have the support of this community and that the libraries will continue to be a safe place for people like me. And, the kids I see who come in and are like me, and hopefully, they find it to be a safe place too. And I just hope that we can keep that momentum going. So I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say.
Cool. Thank you, Elliot. And we must keep that momentum going, right? So, but thank you. Thank you for sharing. Diane.
Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. My son, Michael, just finished Great Hollow Middle School in Smithtown. And unfortunately, he has faced about 4 years of discrimination based on his gender fluidity, which we were very honest with Smithtown and had asked for help from the beginning. What I'm noticing is the misinformation campaign. The people that are spreading these lies really believe that they're true. They're citing these articles. Take, for instance, this Mike Simonelli. He cites articles, and I've been looking through the articles, and none of them are valid, or they're from these crazy magazines and so forth. And they create this fear. So then somebody else believes it because he's citing article after article, or a psychiatrist from another Johns Hopkins University, and people believe that. So this, I think, the disinformation campaign is the biggest thing we have to face and stop, and almost create our own education program, and that book that they're circling around that was never in the children's place. So they're getting people riled up thinking that there's this one particular book, but it's a lie. So we have to counteract that and be ahead of them, and so that's one of my biggest things that I've noticed with all these issues that keep arising with Smithtown.
Sure. Thank you, Diana. And, and thank you to you and Michael Sr. For being so supportive and so out there and so active. And when, as we've seen, whether it's through social media, like we're kind of on now, we are showing this on Facebook Live right now too, but, or through other mediums, is that the other side, when I say the other side, meaning those that are working to, make our schools unsafe, really, mm-hmm. and those that are working against, people have an opportunity and to be able to have rights. I mean, that's what it's about. We always seem to be on the defensive, and we shouldn't be on the defensive, right? Because what we're fighting for is the right side. And so we have to put the other side on the defensive. Now, the other side, with the misinformation, when have we seen them tell the truth at all in the last 6 years or more? We haven't, and so you're right, is that, and that could be part of one of the initiatives we're going to talk about, Diane, that I think where, we get out ahead of the game, and we don't just settle for what may be the minimum, what may be the floor. I think that we've as people who care about other people, and people who care about justice, social justice, have really just stayed with the floor. And we've been afraid to really go for what's needed because, the people are mean. They yell at, you go to these meetings and they yell at other parents and they threaten them, and people are worried for their children. We've heard from so many parents that they want to do something, they want to go and speak up, but they're afraid of what's going to happen to them or their child. And no one should have to live like that. Michael should not have to live like that in the Smithtown schools or anywhere in the community. The parents should not have to worry about that either. And so I think part of what we're going to talk about is not just doing, the floor. We're going for the ceiling, and that's where I think we actually need to start, with our goals. Susan.
Hi, I had to come tonight. My pronouns are she and her, because my niece and her wife are lesbians, and we're very afraid that this new push backwards from the Supreme Court is going to nullify their marriage. They've been together 20 years and they finally got married about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, as soon as same-sex marriage became allowable. And they're going after everything. And I totally agree that we have to go on the offensive. I think that somebody, good people should run for the school board in Smithtown. And if they're MAGA people on the library board, people should run against them and they should be removed. And I think that if you do this kind of an organizing job, the next time these MAGA people won't win the election, and I think the best defense is a good offense. Am I getting that wrong? But that's what I think. And I thank you for having this meeting today, because I'm not happy that they treat other people like this at all.
Yep. Thank you, Susan, for sharing. And I think you're right that, that we are the majority if we all come together like we did last week. But I mean, there's probably a lot of exhaustion out there, right? Exhaustion over 4 years of Donald Trump, over, a couple of years of a pandemic that happened after that. So understandably, there's exhaustion. And fighting for social justice is a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? So we have to keep running. But where one of us does get exhausted, we pass the baton to the other people that are still running. But we have to have our team, which is part of what we're starting tonight, that is not just reacting to stupid stuff that happens, it's getting out ahead of the game, and that we all support one another. And when we do need to take that break for however long that is, we know we have someone covering our backs, and continuing the fight moving forward. Jay.
Hi, David, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so I'll try to keep it quick. My name is Jay. My pronouns are he, him. I have 4 kids, 2 kids that are LGBTQIA, and we are in the town of Smithtown. I love the town of Smithtown. Just a couple of things I want to say real quick. One is to reinforce thank you to the librarians and the staff at the Smithtown Public Library. We love you and we support each other. For someone like Simonelli that was referenced before, who has spoken the last several Smithtown school board meetings, but who also has been disseminating these images from explicit images from a book that even I feel doesn't belong in a children's section of a library, and it's not in Smithtown, but yet it's being shared as if it is. We can't let someone like that get away with it. It's false information. Standing up at a school board meeting with students being recognized at the beginning of the meeting and mocking students for being bisexual, for being, I'm not going to repeat it, but really just going at our youth. It's unacceptable. He's hurting them, he's harming them to further his own pursuits in politics, and that must be rejected and denounced. Whether we're talking about someone like him or Loud Majority, here's my big concern. Is when the library was having their emergency trustee meeting, Loud Majority sent out a note with a post with the Zoom link and all these different things, and telling everyone to flood the meeting. And what ended up happening is memes showing violence. This is the answer, with assault weapons, saying this is the answer to the library issue. That's a problem. Law enforcement was engaged for that, but that's going to become the norm, and that can't happen. And the last thing I just wanted to say is, for those in the town of Smithtown, the next library board meeting is July 19th. Thank you to the board president and others who have stepped up and shown their courage, because we certainly appreciate that.
Sure. Thank you, Jay. And I think, you bring up a very, and thank you for being an advocate out there too, for your family and for the entire community. And so that, things that we kind of have accepted as the norm in our, in society these days cannot be accepted as the norm. I think that's part of what you were talking about, and certainly what is said at these school board meetings. And in Queens, there was a New York City Council person, Vicky Palladino, who threatened to take away funding from the schools that bring Drag Queen Story Hour in. And Drag Queen Story Hour is a nonprofit that really does amazing work reading children's books to kids, and kids love it. They absolutely love it. In addition to, her wanting to take the money away, came, the insightful language and hateful language that, gay people are groomers, and, it's going back to dark times in what we're looking at. And so, so we have to, we're going to be ahead of the game. I have a really good feeling about that. Stefan?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Stefan. My pronoun was he and him. I'm French Canadian, but I married my husband here in Miami 7 years ago. And I have to say that, like probably a lot of people, but I'm ashamed myself. I took for granted that we had that. That was us. That was, and I remember when Trump got elected, my husband said right away, they're coming for us. I said, are you kidding? No, they're not. He was right. And that's 6 years ago, because they started that machine to come after us, to come after women, to come after gay people. And I never been an activist in my life, but what happened made me realize that for a long time in my life, that there's a lot of people who hate me, and it hurts. And I have 2 kids, and I want to make sure that they will never feel that. So yeah, for the first time in my life, I want to be active and do something. I cannot just look at the parade and say it is what it is, because that's not the answer. And like you said, David, I think it's not just about, we need to aim for the ceiling and keep bringing people in to fight the fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Appreciate that. Okay, Eileen. We'll take a few more and then we'll...
Okay, I'll make it really fast. Hi, my name's Eileen Duffy. I live out on the east end of Long Island. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm pretty active in rallies and protests out here. And I'm also a member of the Southampton Town Democratic Committee. And on Wednesday night at 5:30, we're having a rally at the in front of the Supreme Court building in Riverhead, 1 Court Street. It starts at 5:30. And the singular greatest thing about this, we didn't go all the way great, but this is great. It's the committee chairs of the 5 East End Democratic committees that have this, since I've been trying, it's the first time that they've all come together to support a rally among themselves. And we're hoping to expand the number of people who can get up and talk that are beyond the electeds and people for other thing. And it's the new moon, which makes me weepy. So I hope we can see some of you guys tomorrow. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Eileen. Appreciate that. Just to give you a heads up, the initiatives that we're announcing are nonpartisan, right? But there may be partisan things to go to, certainly. If we think about all of the people we live amongst, we have to find a way to bring everyone in and have everyone have a voice toward the common agenda we have. But it sounds like a great event, and for the first time all 5 towns coming together is is amazing, right? Because we know that even people who are on the same side have a hard time working together. So, so that's great. All right, Kat, and then Jessica and EJ, and then we'll move on from there.
Hi, so nice to see some faces here. My name is Kat, pronouns are she, her, they, them. I was a Smithtown High School graduate of the class of 2001. My friends and I started the Gay Straight Alliance at Smithtown High School with a huge amount of support from David and Robert and the whole LGBT network. So it was so heartbreaking to see what was happening in Smithtown 21 years later. I know that my friends and I were group texting like it was a high school reunion, like we were, how devastating, to think that, nothing has changed, right? But one thing that became really obvious is, most of our parents are all still in Smithtown. They're all quite supportive, but they're not really looped into activism, networking. And my understanding is the Smithtown Library Board elections were held and maybe like 1% of Smithtown residents, or a very, very, very low percentage of Smithtown residents actually voted. I know my parents did, but I'm just saying, I think there's a population to be tapped of really well-meaning people who feel discouraged. They feel like, oh, Smithtown's so Trumpy, Smithtown's this, Smithtown's that. But clearly there are a lot of people who care and who, want to support the right things and want to support these kids and families. So, I just wanted to say hi, and I hope that, we can kind of get some of these people a little bit better organized.
Yep, that's a really good point, Kat. And, thank you to you, Liz, Mike, and the whole crew who fought really hard 21 years ago. It wasn't easy to get the Gay Straight Alliance Club 21 years ago. And we had to go to school board meetings then. So, but no, there is, we're going to hear from the president of the Smithtown Library Board shortly. But, even in our plans that we had, we weren't even thinking about library boards. That wasn't, we were thinking school boards, right? But we do now, they're in our sight and in our vision. So there are many opportunities that, we can get involved and make a difference in our communities. And so that's what we're going to definitely take a look at. All right, we have Jessica, EJ, Ben, and then we will move on to the next thing.
Go ahead, EJ, you should be unmuted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, I think, I was reading articles in the Times about, I live out here, Eastern Long Island and Hampton Bays. And one of the things I think this shows is the importance of local elections. Not just on the big picture stuff, Congress and president and stuff, but the local stuff, the county legislative race, school board race, library board race, the state legislature. Because the Republicans in other states have been incredibly successful at organizing on the local level. And they've been able to take control of lots of state legislatures where all these bills come out of. So the lesson we need to learn as progressives, I guess, generally, is we need to be engaged in the boring stuff. That does not on TV, not big rallies, all that, but on the very local elections. Really important, because this is where these guys get their start. That's my pitch.
That's a good point. And the solutions we're going to, or some of the initiatives that we think is part of the solution, is all about local, right? Making change at the local level, because it's really been, if you've been watching the news, but keeping up with everything, what happened on Friday at the Supreme Court was the culmination of a 40-year plan, really, to overturn Roe v. Wade by getting in at the local level, getting judges appointed, all different things from schools and et cetera. So, local, they always say change happens at the local level, and it really does. It impacts the greater communities and issues that we're fighting for. So thanks, EJ. Ben.
Hi, my name is Ben. He, him, his are my pronouns. it was really scary and hurtful to hear what happened at Smithtown. And it really brought to light a lot of things, even in my own community where I'm from in Ronkonkoma. And what we have been noticing over the past several months is a more loud and outspoken group of people that are anti-LGBT, specifically on social media. It's been getting very disheartening, very hurtful. People are just coming out of the woodwork, just randomly spewing anti-LGBT rhetoric. And it came to a point, you know, I was the type of person that I would always rail against it privately and say, you know, this has to stop, things need to change. But as someone else mentioned, I was never really an activist. And it came to a point where it culminated to where me and several other people in our community got together. We started our own group on Facebook, Prideful Parents, just to try to get a opposite loud voice to basically bring some humanity and some sanity, you know, back to the conversation. And, you know, what we're trying to do is we've reached out to our high school. We've, you know, spoke with our GSA teacher that, you know, runs that GSA group. And we're trying to make it very well known that there is support, that we're trying to help. And, you know, one of the things is, for me being in this group is or being in this meeting is, I want to touch base with other people. I want to hear what we can do. And I want to be more involved in trying to turn back that tide that unfortunately started about 6 years ago, where, you know, unfortunately 45 just opened up that door for people to spew out whatever negative thoughts that they have in their head. And I think it's time people realize that, no, that is not okay. And we need to get some semblance of sanity back.
Thank you, Ben. You know, and you know, everything you said was, you know, spot on, you know, and that, I mean, some of it unfortunately spot on, right? The attacks against LGBTQ youth in our schools and in our communities as well. And, you know, there was a point in, I believe it was March and April, that, and when I say we were dealing with it, it sounds like, you know, listen, it's our job to work through this, right? It's the LGBT network's job to be out there. But it was the parents and the kids and the teachers that were really dealing with horrific situations, from Sag Harbor. You know, it seems like we were having 3 or 4 a day in Smithtown, you know, to school districts in Nassau County and Queens, you know, and it just all was really coming together. And you could see that it's part of a larger strategy of the right wing, right? And you know, we may have become complacent or just exhausted, you know, and we can't. And so, you know, and I think, you know, we'll hear from just a couple of other people, then we do need to move on to talk about what we're launching tonight. But, you know, I think for sometimes when people hear, you know, being an activist, right, that it could just be overwhelming, right? What is an activist? Activism could be so huge, you know, people think being an activist is, you know, just, you know, such a huge task and huge undertaking. And being an activist could be so many different things. You know, it could be doing what we did last week and speaking up. You know, it could be getting out there in the streets and going to rallies. It could be, you know, maybe signing up to be an ambassador, one of the things, school district ambassador, one of the things we're going to talk about later. It could be, you know what, running for office, which is a local office, which is one of the things we're going to talk about. So being an activist really means, you know, all of us here together, standing together and doing our own little piece in that work to basically bring peace, you know, to all of our families. So Charlie, Jessica, Michael, and then we'll move on.
Hi, my name's Charlie. I use they, them pronouns. So I have a question I just have a few thoughts about education in general, right? Because this is what it comes down to, right? It comes down to education, being knowledgeable on like issues that's going on in the world, just having an idea of how it impacts people, and also that even right now, as we're talking about Roe v. Wade, just using the binary terms of how it only affects women when it doesn't. It impacts individuals who have a uterus, right? It impacts trans men, impacts non-binary folks. So I'm curious to know, like, where there can be a gap, where there can be a bridge for the gap between, like, what happens in schools education wise, right? Because my main primary concern, though, is that what are districts promoting, right? What are districts saying about talking about LGBT issues? What happens when there are schools who are part of a district, but they're a Catholic or a private institution? Like, how much is influenced with in private schools, what based off of district, and how they work together to specify like what is, and I wish I didn't have to use this word, but I guess what is found to be deemed like appropriate level, because it's very easy for private schools to only share what they based on their beliefs. So that was just like the biggest concern that came up for me with all of the events that are happening within the last week. It's just, where can that bridge be made for that gap, and like how can we separate that, because being in a closed space and going out into the world that's filled with diversity, it's very easy to internalize those like core beliefs and internalize everything that we're taught, and it takes a while to break out of what we've learned based off of what we grew up with. So when we enter a world that's very diverse and we start to learn more about the real issues happening in this world, like that's when there's such a big disconnect between education. And it really makes me concerned that when there's not examples of like diversity in the children's section of a library, or there's no or when they're being shown that this is disgraceful and wrong, like that really just hurts to a level that I cannot express in words. But those are where my concerns is where that bridge can be. So
Sure. Well, thanks, Charlie, for that. And that one of the initiatives that we're going to talk about is going to talk a little bit about curriculum, right? And about, moving things forward. The LGBT network is in a lot of schools. When I say in, we do, trainings and for students, and trainings for teachers, workshops for students, and you name it. But there needs to be a lot more, and that's one of the goals. That's going to be one of the goals of one of the initiatives when we take a look at curricula, but curricula through the New York State Education Department and what's mandated and required. And one of the things I think, and I don't know, if, I'm sure other folks are just as frustrated. It's a matter of, yes, we need to put the right people in office, right? Certainly that will, stand for the right things and and hopefully pass legislation, et cetera. But I think it's time that that we don't only have people who are supporters just talking the talk. They need to walk the walk, and that has not happened. And enough is enough, right? And so that's why we're going to take back the power, build the power of being able to, ensure curriculum, ensure LGBT instruction and curriculum amongst a wider curriculum. But we'll talk a little bit, briefly, a little bit more about that later. Okay, Jessica, Michael, and then I want to bring Brianna on to talk.
Hi, David. It's Jessica Nadler.
Oh.
Hard to believe we are still having this discussion 25 years later. But what I wanted to say is, obviously, I grew up in Huntington, right next to Smithtown, so it was extremely disheartening to hear of this happening right near my hometown. But what I want the people on the call to know is that we're looking to you. I no longer live on Long Island. I'm in Northern Virginia, outside of DC, and we are having the same discussions here. Our kids are fighting the same fights in our schools.
Mm-hmm.
So we are looking to you as the example of what we can do here, because we need that help. And thank you, David, for continuing all of this all this time.
Thank you, Jessica. It's really good to see you. And you know, and you're in the northern, you said Northern Virginia, so in the suburbs, right? So you know, and that's supposed to be pretty progressive town. And but I think what you're bringing up is that it's part of a national movement, right? So what we're seeing here on Long Island is happening everywhere in many places, if not most places, because it's been they've been organizing, right?
Right.
And
It's
so,
the same pictures of books. It's the same arguments. It's the same, you know, going back to you're not born gay, they need to recruit, which
mhm.
I can't even believe like we're having that conversation still.
Yep. Like
And
we
just
had.
aside for the night rose, yes, it is me.
It's so yeah. So we'll continue, you know, and Long Island tends to lead the way. We really do. So you know, I think with what we're going to implement, we'll do that. But it's so good to see you, Jessica. Thank you. All right, Michael, and then we are going to move to the next portion.
Hi there, thank you. I'll try and keep it brief. I've taken some notes. My name is Michael Berner, pronouns are he, they. I'm not a Long Island resident. I'm not a Long Island native. I've been living on Long Island nearly 10 years, but I'm not a Smithtown resident. Hearing this news story was a bit of a shot across the bow. I've typically been involved in LGBTQ news and politics pretty consistently throughout my life, but seeing this happen on Long Island, I work in the Department of Political Science at Stony Brook University, just a staff member, not actually doing research. But the things that I see and the people that I work with have painted this picture of partisan politics across the country about these playbooks, whether they're intentionally being disseminated or being picked up by people that want to basically fearmonger. If you have read any history book about what direction this country is currently headed in, it's fairly clear. We've lost the Supreme Court. Those are lifetime appointments. There's going to have to be radical change to try and make any gains back on that front. So I guess I'm hearing, and one thing I guess I'm not terribly familiar with the LGBT network, and this is my area to re-educate myself and get reacquainted, I guess, is when, and you'll probably spell this out, David, about what the next steps are in terms of planning and activism, involvement, however you want to spell it out individually, is even just thinking locally is, I don't think, going to be enough anymore. Because if there's this broad disinformation and misinformation campaign, not only locally, not only across the state level, but across the country and across, frankly, the globe, there's been a backslide in democratic institutions across the globe that we've seen over the past 6 years. So it's not just Long Island that needs to be conscientious of the discussions and battles we're facing. So I'm just very curious, I guess, how we're going to leverage civic and democratic institutions and make sure that this kind of canary in the coal mine instance of a relatively progressive school, Long Island district that happened to ban library books. I don't have children, so there's a whole lot of different things I'm not entirely aware of about what happened this past week, but it's startling and it's frightening because it's happening here, it's happening now. So I'm curious what the next steps are going to be.
Sure, thank you. And we're going to discuss that shortly. You know, I think that, you know, the way things go in New York a lot will center around how Long Island does things and what happens on Long Island. And so, you know, I think that, you know, when people think of New York and people think of different policies and et cetera, they, you know, the world centers around Manhattan, right? And Long Island is not Manhattan. You know, Queens, where we are also, is not Manhattan. Also, Queens is not Long Island too, but you know, so it's you know, it's different. And if I'm gonna just share with you something that I really don't talk about too much, well, a little bit here and there, you know, but I started this organization. It'll be 30 years in September. And so we're, you know, entering our third decade of service in just in a couple of months. But I started, it was my, this part I have shared, but it was my master's project when I was a student at Stony Brook University, studying for my master's in social work. And I created a project. I decided to do a project instead of a thesis because, quite frankly, I was like, I don't want to write another paper. I'm going to do a project. And so the project was to create a curricula to go out into Long Island schools to talk about what it was like to grow up LGBT, particularly in the suburbs. Got into a few schools, sounds like it was a secretive mission and on the down low, and it pretty much was back in 1993. But no matter where I went, and there were 7 different school districts, I implemented the project, there would always be a couple of people that would shuffle their papers, they would hit them on the floor, kids that is, hit them on the floor, they wait for everyone else to leave so that they felt comfortable and safe coming up and asking the gay speaker a question myself. And that question was the same, whether it was in East Hampton, in Ronkonkoma, Sachem, or Uniondale, or the other places in between. And the question was exactly the same. Is there any place I can go just to meet other people like myself, right? And think about that. That was just a simple request. Kids just wanted a safe space, back in 1993, and that's what they want today too. And so, so when I started the organization, it was called Legally back then, Long Island Gay and Lesbian Youth, which still does exist. It's the largest organization of the LGBT network. But, one of the greatest lessons I learned, because I started this organization on Long Island, and the county executives in both counties were Republican. It was Tom Galata in Nassau County and Bob Gaffney in Suffolk County. Both legislatures were Republican controlled, just like they are today. And so I didn't have a choice like my Manhattan colleagues, right? Where they could just be like, we're not talking to them, right? We're only going to talk to, the side that agrees with us or, purports to agree with us, right? And so, what I learned was that, the kids that were asking for that place where they could just meet other people like myself, I couldn't ignore talking to those who were in charge. I had to figure out a way or a message that would resonate with them. And yes, it was a different language that I spoke, more from a criminal justice lens, really, in suicide prevention, versus an equity, equality lens. But what I did learn, and that was the biggest lesson that I've learned in 30 years, is that everyone is on the table. And that's where I think, we have been so successful on Long Island. Because let's think about our communities, right? Politically, it is what it is in terms of, who is, who's in charge now, who may be in charge moving forward in the bigger offices, but our neighbors, the people that we may go out to, see at restaurants or, in our local communities. We have to remember that everyone's on the table and we can't just shoo away anyone. We have to figure out a way to bring more people in. And by doing that, we're going to be able to, build a bigger army, if you will, that will fight for it, no matter where they may stand or what they may do in the voting booth. And yes, we may have personal feelings about it. I'm sure other people have family members who vote the other way, just like I do. But we talk, and we're able to do. I just want to share that we should just not, we shouldn't throw. We have to build a stronger movement and get people who believe in the values that we do with the initiatives that we're going to talk about. But our work, we should not just throw anyone off the table. There will be some that you do. I mean, I had said this the other day when I was talking with someone, and this isn't a real word, but there are people that are uneducable, right? And when we realize, the uneducable people that we're dealing with, let's not waste our time, right? There will be other people who we can talk to who may challenge, and critically think a little bit more. And so, so I think the pool for us to really have a long-term sustainable change is pretty big. Some are much easier to bring in, some are not as easy, but we're going to figure it out with what we're doing. So with that, I want to see Brianna, are you still here? Hopefully, Brianna, you're here. Brianna Baker Steins, the president of the Smithtown Library. I think I hear you.
Yes. How are you?
Good. So, first want to thank you. I know that, you were not part of the vote to remove the pride displays. But, through your leadership in a quick amount of time, you were able to, get that resolution to rescind it. So I just want to give you a few seconds to share whatever you want to share about what happened last week. And then, of course, we'll just talk about some other stuff.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna. I want to say hi to everyone, especially the Smithtown residents and the Smithtown Library patrons. I apologize for not having my camera on. It's been a crazy week. The library or me are not used to this level of attention. So, we really are just winging it at this point. But I did want to come on and say hi to everyone. Just to give some background, usually only 900 people vote at the library budget and election. But after our 3 of our trustees were endorsed by a certain Facebook group, we had, I think, about 2,000 people actually come out and vote. So there was huge numbers from the communities at this time voting for these people. And so it's really been hard navigating through that, navigating between what it seems that the community wants and, my own personal views and what I know is right. So it was really surreal Tuesday night, seeing how the situation was twisted to be about the alleged anxiety that parents were feeling instead of, supporting the children that really need support. But luckily, all of you guys commented, left us comments online, sent us emails, and the outpouring from people like you is really what got us to reverse the vote, because it's not simple to have a special meeting. It's not easy under open meeting law, but because of the outpouring from everybody, we were able to have that special meeting, and I'm so thankful for everybody's comments. And also, I want to say thank you for supporting our librarians and our staff, because they're really the ones who are taking the beating right now in terms of what's going on. They have had threats and such, but thank you all for your kind words, and thank you for speaking out.
Thank you, Brianna. And so in a second, I ask you to come back and just talk about what it means to be a library board member, because that's
Sure.
one of the initiatives. So so here are the things that we're looking at launching right now. Now, some of these are things we have been talking about for a while. We were talking about launching these first 2 things in the fall, but because of what happened in Smithtown last week, we said, okay, we don't have a day to waste. So things may not be perfect in terms of what we're going to be looking at, but they're launched as of tonight. So the first thing is that we're launching and we're asking for people to sign up as school district ambassadors, right? And we're calling it a school district ambassador for you to sign up for whatever school district you're in, so that we can increase the visibility, the education, and the opportunity and the safety, for all of our students. And JR, do you want to, or Robert, can you put that up on the screen? And we're going to put the links in the chat as well. And so what this district ambassador would do is what you will do. We're bringing together parents, teachers, students, and community members who will be selected as ambassadors in their districts in Long Island and Queens, to ensure if there's something that happens, like, folks have shared tonight in Ronkonkoma and in other school districts, that we have a rapid response. We're on the ground right away. We have our ambassadors out there, right? If someone tries to play games with, denying education or visibility or displays, or denies a gay straight alliance club, we're going to have a rapid response on the ground. But we're not going to stop there. Rapid response to curtail any educational or social opportunities for LGBTQ students and faculty too, and parents. And we're also going to work to expand LGBTQ instruction and opportunities for students in every elementary, middle, and high school. And yes, there is age-appropriate education that can be taught in the elementary schools. The LGBT network only goes to a handful of elementary schools, but when we do, that workshop is more about stereotypes and different families. And the kids are very aware at that point. In fact, there are so many kids being raised by same-sex parents, and they don't hear anything about their families in schools. So, so that's just a couple of the things that we're going to do. We also, we proposed a bill in Albany a few years ago, but it went nowhere. And remember who's in charge in Albany, right? These bills should pass. Why haven't they passed? right? So let's not just take anything for granted that if someone gets in, we just let them glide by saying, oh, we support you. No, it's about action, right? And so there's a bill in New York called the Teach Lgbtny bill to make teaching LGBT history mandated in school curriculum, just like it is for other different groups and other different issues. You know, we teach about, and not enough, it's not to say that it's enough, you know, we teach a little bit, well, I don't want to get into, that's another issue with critical race theory, right, in terms of what's brought up. But you know, we need to do more to teach about you know, race and racial justice. We need to do more to teach about, you know, certainly LGBT history, which is left out of our curricula right now. You know, what's mandated right now is to teach about the Holocaust and the Irish potato famine. If we could teach about the Irish potato famine, we could teach about Harvey Milk. You know, and Harvey Milk, a Long Islander who graduated from Bayshore High School 75 years ago and became, you know, the first one of the first out elected officials in our country. So that's one of the things that the school ambassadors will take part in. Also, we have an annual conference. We'll take part in that in terms of bringing our students together. We had it at Citi Field this year with over 700 students. That happened the week after the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. It was a huge rally and conference. And then also to help plan biannual regional summits. Like, you know, listen, we're a Long Island, right? And we're spread out far apart. So how can we, I think some of what I've heard tonight as well this would help, where, you know, we want to feel connected more. We want to meet other people who feel the same way that we do and be able to work with them a little bit more. So these biannual regional summits, the conference, the boots on the ground, you know, as a rapid response team to, stuff that may be happening that shouldn't happen. And then to, increase instruction in our schools. So this is where the link should be up where you could sign up to be a school district ambassador. And we want to see all 124 Long Island school districts. We want to have ambassadors in all of these school districts, right? Because once we do that, we're organizing in a much more, broad, really community-minded way. So that's the first thing. The next thing that we're launching is, and Robert, maybe you could put this up, is that, there it is. We're calling it the Candidate Training Academy. So what this will be is to encourage folks who want to run for local office, but don't know what the hell to do, right, or where to start. We're going to have an academy that right now is looking like, a 5-day intensive training academy that is going to help give the tools and the knowledge. If you want to go down a little bit more, yes, Andy Hum is also Long Island born in Nassau County, I believe. Go down a little bit more. And so, one of the things, and it says it here, is that I've heard from so many parents that, and we've heard a little bit tonight as well, that, I go to these school board meetings, they're horrific. People are saying, and we heard it from Jay. Jay said it, that people are just getting up saying whatever the hell they want to say. And it's just, it's awful. And they want to get involved. They don't know what to do. They want to be on their school board, but you know what? I'm afraid that I just don't know what to do, or that, I think that, I may not be as well positioned or as qualified to run for the school board. And the fact of the matter is that, everyone here that is pushing to get active is more qualified than, the groups that are running, like you heard that guy, Michael Simonelli and et cetera. And so, having strong ties to the community is really important, a smart strategy. And could you go down a little bit more, Robert? More? Okay, so here are some of the things that, if you go down a little bit more, that it's a nonpartisan. It's not a Democrat thing. It's not a Republican thing. In fact, our school boards and library boards and community boards should not be Democrat or Republican. They shouldn't be a political party thing. And that's where some of the issue is coming in. So it's a nonpartisan academy where, and these are just some of the training that you will get, on how to prepare and run a campaign, learning local issues, planning, budgeting, fundraising, marketing, public speaking, voter targeting and contact, online campaigning, get out the vote, early voting strategies, because we now have early voting. So, if you have thought about, or if something sparks you tonight to say, hey, I want to run for my local school board, or you know what, after what happened in the Smithtown Library, and I believe the person that was really against pride displays, Marie G or something, I believe her term is up this year, isn't it? Marie Gorgenti, who doubled down last week on that meeting as well. Her seat will be voted on this fall. You know what, folks? Let's find someone, right? And we're going to get this academy up and running, and we're going to help that person, through the academy get trained, and then, work together as a, as an organized community to help one another. So if you've ever thought about running, or even if you haven't thought about running, but after tonight, we're like, hey, you know what? I want to do this. We're gonna launch this academy this summer. Robert, you have said it. There's a hand up or something, or there's one more thing we want to talk about as well that we don't have a webpage for yet because we just put this together. But so the last thing, and then the training, is the training at day or night? It's not scheduled yet. We got to get people signed up, and then we're going to work with folks. Most likely, it'll be around not people's. There's going to be more than one training. This academy, I believe, is going to run, 3 times a year. So, because there's different election times throughout the year. So again, this is about getting our community trained and feeling confident about running a campaign and organizing for the long haul. Hope you can see that a lot of this stuff is for the long haul. It may not be the sexiest stuff around, although I think it is very sexy to take over all local communities and be ambassadors to the schools. But it is for the long haul change. And I think we can make some big time short-term gains and then completely change the landscape of who's running our school boards, who's running our library boards, and who knows what else it may, where people may go with that. And that's how we're going to make the permanent sustainable change. So we're the ones making the decisions, for our schools and our libraries and other places. And then the last thing, and you can stop sharing now, but the last thing that we're going to do is, and some folks have been to our center in Hauppauge, and some may have been to our center in Astoria as well. And we do have another one in Bayshore that's opening this summer, but and in Sag Harbor too. But our centers in Hauppauge and Astoria, we're now going to be launching what's called the Centers for Justice. And this is for us to work across our different issues, whether it's racial justice, reproductive justice, immigration, environmental justice. And what we're going to do is we have incredible facilities in both places. Large meeting rooms, small meeting rooms. We do have cubicles if folks need it. What we want to do is bring in the local groups that may not have a place to meet, or to get together and organize, and offer our center for free to be a home where you could come and have that space to have as small or as large of a meeting as you need. If you need a desk and a phone, whatever it is, we will make sure that you have it. Because when we all work together across our different issues, really the issues are the same in the end, right? We're going to be stronger for it together. And so, so our Centers for Justice kicks off right away. It's nonpartisan. So if it's a Democrat group or a Republican group or something like that, that's not what this is about. Well, you can rent the center if you are a partisan group, but if you're not a partisan group, the center will be made available to you for free. And then hopefully we can all learn from one another about the different issues that impact our our communities, because there is a lot of intersectionality as well. And then we have a movement that becomes intersectional. When we all work together, we truly are the majority, and it's really about us, just having that vehicle, that space, to be able to come together and work under, a one home, if you will, while we can learn from one another and support one another too. And then of course, when we're all working together and you have all the different groups, whether it's a mom's group, in a particular community, or a local group working on immigration issues, or racial justice and critical race theory, whatever it may be, or in working on our environment or gun safety, that these are all the things that we're going to have a place in Hauppauge and Astoria for all this organizing to happen. The space is open, it is free. And I mean, there's, especially in Hauppauge, there's incredible IT stuff that we can help you with too. So think about it, spread the word because there's a lot of groups out there that we don't know about, certainly, and so let's start to really bring all of us together to be able to do that. So and that's where, if you know of a group, or if you're part of a group that wants to be part of this, and you could just email me directly, and I'll put my email in the chat. If someone could put my email in the chat, david@lgbtnetwork.org, and we could talk about getting you the space that you need, to meet with your group, to build your group, and to build our cross movements together, which I think is going to be extremely effective. Because I don't know about you, we always sometimes feel like we're working in silos, right? And get pretty tired. So, but advocacy, oh yeah, absolutely. Advocacy and activist training opportunities for kids and teens. Yep, we have some already, but we need to increase it. So, but yes, we need to have a youth component of this as well for our young people that want to be active in that way in leadership opportunities. So with that, those are the three things: the school ambassador, I think we put all that in there, the school ambassador, the candidate training academy, and the centers for justice. These are three new things. And this is really about building leadership and representation at the local level, and keeping it, us given the support to keep it sustainable, right? And to grow it. And for us to shoot for the ceiling, not the floor. The floor is not good enough, and I think we've stayed at that place for a long time. And because we've just stayed there for so long, the floor is being ripped out from under us, really. But we're not going to let that happen, right? We won last week, and we've shown what the power could do. We heard from, Brianna saying that our voices really made a difference, and that's what we're going to do and continue. So I am the worst person at keeping, looking at the chat. So I don't know if there's any, we do have a few more minutes I mean, listen, I could stay on here all night, but I don't think everybody wants to. But, so are there any questions that we could try to answer about the initiatives that we're launching?
David, we have a hand up from Sandra.
Okay, Sandra. I think you're on mute, Sandra.
Yeah, I am. I tried to unmute, but I had to get permission. Thank you very much for having this meeting. My name is Sandra Benedetto. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a lesbian, been at this, appreciate the people who said 25 years, we're still dealing with this, more like 50 for me. I would like to just comment about a couple of things. I'm a lesbian. I'm in Southold on the East End. I am the vice chair of Southold Democrats. I am a part of the anti-bias task force here in Southold. So I really commend you on your initiatives. I am about to start something over the course of this year for Run for Something in local town elections. I realize your initiative is nonpartisan, but there are other resources. So I don't know if anybody out here is on the East End, but I wanted to raise my hand as someone to be contacted. I also think, I'm not sure about other anti-bias task forces around the county, but ours has a liaison to every school district within Southold Town. So while I don't think those people are necessarily the ambassadors that you want, we want LGBTQ people to actually be represented. I do think that there are alliances that can be built. So just want to kind of identify myself to people, not only in the county, but also out here on the East End. I know Camille, who I've seen somewhere on this on this meeting, and I'll put my email in the chat if anybody wants to reach out to me from the East End. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Sandra. And so, yeah, the anti-bias task forces have always been a great resource and tool. You know, and for the school ambassadors, it's not just LGBTQ. We want parents, we want teachers, right? I know a lot of teachers are just so frustrated with their school boards, right? And we've heard it from the teachers that, and that was one situation in a school district where, you know, where they were bringing up LGBT instruction and they were told not to, and et cetera. But so I know teachers are frustrated with what they hear at the school board level. So, you know, parents, teachers, students, community members, it doesn't matter your sexual orientation or gender identity. We're here together today, right? For a common goal. So anyone who's interested, the Campaign Academy is open to you for whatever you want to do to get involved, you know, to get that support, and the school ambassadorship as well. All right, Susan. And then Phoebes.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if somebody would repeat the demonstration that's going to be in Riverhead, the time and the place. I'd be interested in knowing that. It sort of slipped by me. So if you would repeat that so I can write it down, I'd like to know about that.
Sure, we can put that in the chat. I think Eileen, you
Wednesday,
talked about
I
that.
got that, but I didn't get the time and place.
It's at 1 Court Street, I think, right? At the courts in Riverhead. So Eileen will put that in the chat. Yep, thank you. Phoebes. I think we have to unmute you.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Phoebes. I'm actually a youth LGBT network. I've been going here for almost a year. I work with Chris, Camille, Robert, pretty much everyone here. It's nice to see you again. I actually saw you at the talent show. I was wondering about the ambassador thing. Students, could students and teachers run together? Because I know actually my teacher, my advisor for my GSA was recently here, Mrs. Federico. She had to go. It's her son's birthday. So I was just wondering about, like, could students and teachers do it together? Because I know I was questioning that. But.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It definitely needs to have student representation, teacher representation, communities, parents. You know, it's really for, you know, all who believe in what its goals are. So that would be great. That would be great to see you and your teacher part of the ambassadorship.
Thank you for answering the question. I'm just going to stay on for the rest of the meeting, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Phoebe. So, so this is, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here tonight. You know, as we put out stuff, if you know, as you think about it, if you have questions, reach out. We do want to get this ambassador program really fully functional, you know, over the summer, and certainly ready to go as the new school year starts in the fall. The Candidate Training Academy, you know, depending on how many people we have, you know, we can get it started sooner than later, but definitely want to launch it this summer. And then we have to think about that race in Smithtown, right? That's coming up, you know, for the library board, for the person that spearheaded the pride displays to be taken down and to remove the children's books. You know, and then the Center for Social Justice, Centers for Justice. Again, if you're part of a group, need a space, and we can also offer our Sag Harbor space too on the East End. Just let us know. Let's start to continue. Let's continue to build that movement together. And by signing up for this, I guess everyone's on our email list. We'll try not to bombard you. We usually only send out one email a week. And in times like these, send it out a little bit more, because when we need action, we need people to take the action. So, but again, any questions you have, just let us know. Thank you so much for your involvement, your activism, your voice. It made the difference last week. You guys made the difference last week. And we want to continue that every single day of the year. So thank you again. Appreciate it, and look forward to seeing everyone in some form of the new activism that we're unleashing across Long Island and Queens. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.